Hi, welcome to Gotham Reader Radio. I'm your host, the Gotham Reader, and before we jump into today's issue, while there's no major corrections from the previous issue that I could think of, I do just want to apologize in advance to anyone who speaks French because I am going to be butchering your language today. With that in mind, let's just jump in today's issue, which we will be looking at Detective Comics number 34. Peril in Paris. Published in December 1939, meaning we will be closing out the year on this issue, which is written by Gardner Fox, once again, with art by Bob Kane and Sheldon Moldoff, with the cover page being done by Craig Fliessel. And while I don't know too much about the man, from what I was researching, he seems to be quite the jack of all trades when it comes to working in the illustration and magazine / comic publication industry. But other than that, seems like a pretty interesting guy. Now, as usual, I will be using Batman Chronicles Volume 1. If you would like to read along, you could also find it, I believe, in Batman's archives and, of course, the DC Universe database. With all that being said, let's just jump into the issue, starting with the cover page, in which we see a masked man in a trench coat throwing a what seems like a captain over the edge of a boat. Quite the wild scarf on the individual. Other than that, nothing too interesting to say. Personally, I like Fred Gordonier's art a little bit more. Although one interesting little fun fact about this cover is that this is the last cover to be on Detective Comics that won't exhibit something Batman or Batman adjacent. So at this point, let's just say DC is starting to figure out where the money's at in this particular collection of comics. From there, we can move on to the title splash, in which we see the orange block letters that Bob Kane and Sheldon Moldoff are becoming, I guess, quite content with, seeing as they've used it for the last 3 issues. We get a nice big old glimpse of Batman's head, and then, of course, the blurb for today's issue, which goes... The Batman, having rescued his fiancée Julie from a sinister figure named the Monk, sees her safely on board a boat for America. He is to follow her later when he becomes involved in a mystery. Okay, so that gives us kind of general idea of where this issue is currently placed. It would be positioned right after issue 32, which is Batman versus the Vampire Part 2, where he takes on a sinister figure known as the Monk, who hypnotized his fiancée Julie and lured her to Hungary. Luckily, Batman stopped him with his trusty sidearm, and now, from what we can gather, he has sent Julie home to America, and if we're to trust the title, he is currently in Paris, making his way home as well. We then move into the story proper, where Bruce Wayne is leaving the motel that he's residing in when he notices a familiar figure. That looks like old Jed Farnell. Jed! Oh, Jed! Jed, oh, Lord! Bruce Wayne is shocked to find that the man that he thought was his friend Jed is none other than an individual who has absolutely no face at all. The faceless man calmly replies, "I don't blame you, sir. I gave you a shock, not having any face, didn't I? I'm sorry," before proceeding along his way. Bruce, left semi-dumbfounded, thinks quietly to himself, "That's mighty queer. A man without a face. I'd like to look into this, but..." Seems focusing on the fact that he must get home to go see his lovely wife, Julie Madison, and stop, I guess, Manhattan or New York City related crimes. We then jump to a hotel in Midtown, where we see a young blonde woman in distress, claiming that her life is in danger from a man known as the Duc Dorothée, master of the Apaches. She then flees her home, waving down a taxi. And luckily, not only is she able to wave down a taxi, but it seems fate has smiled on her, as in that taxi is none other than our heroic figure of the story, Bruce Wayne. Bruce welcomes the young lady into the back of the taxi, offering how he may be of service, when a dagger flies quickly behind her, plunging itself into the back seat. Bruce, thinking quickly, grabs the young woman, proclaiming, "Someone seems to be after you, with daggers at that." They then flee the taxi, trying to find some space between them and the would-be assassins. Bruce Wayne then turns to the young woman, demanding an explanation for all this melodrama. But at that very moment, the young woman faints in fear. Bruce, looking around, notices the man from earlier with no face, who quickly hurries Bruce with the young lady to a safe room back in the Midtown Hotel. Bruce Wayne then demands an explanation for all this madness. The faceless man then proclaims that he is named Charles Marie, and this is his sister Carl, and their lives are in danger at the hands of a man by the name of Duc de la Torre, who has become obsessed with the young Carol and their family's money. Charles had tried to intervene to stop this mad Frenchman, but using his evil science ray had burned off the features of his face, leaving him in his current state. Bruce Wayne, after hearing the young man's plight, considers what he will do next. He then unfortunately has to inform the young siblings that there is very little he can do to help them, and asks to be pardoned from the room. While the two wait in uncertainty what they will do next, they are then luckily saved by the appearance of the mythic figure of the night, the legendary hero himself, the Batman, who leaves the two in awe before Charles quickly writes down instructions to provide to the Batman so that he may defeat the dangerous Dr. Torre. So, in traditional Gardner Fox fashion, we do get a quite interesting setup for the premise of this issue. At this point, we've gotten vampires, we've gotten dirigibles of doom. I can't really front Fox for doing or continuing to do something out of left field. A faceless man and a evil scientist from Paris. It definitely has a uniqueness to it, but also this is the third, yes, I want to say it's the third villain created by Gardner Fox, who just seems to be evil criminal mastermind / super scientist. But with that all being said, there is a lightheartedness to this issue. I'm not going to lie. Bruce's reaction to the faceless man, Bruce's reaction to Carl getting daggers thrown at her, and just the declaration of all this melodrama. It's very interesting to see Bruce portrayed as this no-nonsense individual, even to the point where he just frankly tells the Marie siblings that there is little he could do to help them before stepping out of the room, just for Batman to show up in the nick of time. Which, as absurd as that scene is not the biggest deal. I don't think Bruce is an international superstar. I don't think he states his name once to the siblings. It's also early comics. Once again, I don't want to overthink it, but it is fun to just poke a little bit of the holes in the story, if you know what I mean. But with that being said, just want to make a couple of quick comments before we move along with the story. We next see Batman in the middle of the Paris night, jumping from rooftop to rooftop before he jumps and descends down a manhole, leading him into the sewers of Peril, where he has been told that he could find the underground lair of Duc de la Torre. After Batman lands in the sewers, he finds himself surrounded by thugs who have declared loyalty to the Duke. Batman makes quick work of them before he finds himself face to face with the devilish Frenchman. But before Batman could subdue the evil mastermind, he is blasted in the face with some type of light beam shot from the end of the Duke's cane. Batman finds himself awake later at the Temple of the Duke, who then reveals the most diabolical death trap we've seen in a Batman comic so far, the Wheel of Chance. A devilish contraption, which the Duke explains will spin the Batman round and round until he ends up with one of two fates. One where he's flung from the wheel and his body is smashed against the cement wall, leaving him crushed to death. Or he'll stay strapped to the wheel on the spin cycle of doom where he will lose his mind. Batman is then fixed to the torture wheel, which begins to rotate. Batman, knowing that he can't die today, uses all his might to break free from the bindings, and using his bat-like timing, chancing a near impossible jump, Batman sends himself flying through a chute in the ceiling, which lands him in a riotous garden of colors, where all the flowers have the faces of women. Batman, quite reasonably so, begins to question his sanity. We then jump to the Duke, who is observing the Batman's break from reality behind a glass window. He then commands his Frenchmen to bring him the Marie siblings, and that he will deal with the Batman later. The thugs then capture the siblings and bring them to the Duke's temple, where the Duke then declares that he will strap Charles Marie to this wheel of chance, where he will meet his untimely end. Batman, still not too certain what is going on around him, begins to hear the thoughts of one of the nearby flowers, who telekinetically communicates with him. "I send you my thoughts, stranger. You must release us. Follow the hedge to a glass door which leads to the wheel room. The rest is up to you." Batman regains his composure and, more importantly, his desire for vengeance. He then breaks free from the Mad Garden and begins his quest for retribution. So this is probably where Gardner Fox peaks when it comes to his comic book strangeness, to say the least. But before we get into the Garden of Colors, I do want to just talk about the main villain of today's issue for a bit, the Duke Dorotori, which I'm almost certain that's not how it's pronounced, but we're just going to roll with it. The Duke is another mad scientist, criminal mastermind. I know I stated it before. This is the third time we're doing this, and the only difference is, I guess, what the Duke is using his evil science for, and that, I guess, instead of being a man with a Napoleon complex or a just general mad scientist in the way that Dr. Death was, the Duke's main gimmick seems to be that he is an evil Frenchman. As far as his science goes, it's definitely a bit out there. I would say it rivals the strangeness of the monk. We see that he has a death ray that is able to melt off the face of individuals. He has a cane that was able to stun the Batman with a flash of light. He has the Wheel of Chance, which, as stated earlier, is one of, if not the most creative death traps so far. And, of course, the Garden of Flowers, which it never explains in the issue what this is or the purpose of it, but I'm going to go on a limb and make a leap in logic and say that most likely these women or these flowers are previous women that the Duke has taken fancy with. This might most likely be the fate of Peril if Batman hadn't appeared. Definitely pretty weird. Like, it's definitely pulpy strangeness, and while it is fun when it just kind of flies out of the blue with no explanation, it kind of seems like Fox didn't really tighten up his story as much as maybe he needed to before publishing the issue. But with that all in mind, it's still for the most part entertaining. I can't front it too much because, you know, without this, you don't get a lot of the future wackiness that Batman is kind of known for. But with all that out of the way, and me kind of getting out my thoughts and opinions on the scene, let's just jump back into the issue. The Batman then breaks into the room with the Wheel of Chance, and using his amazing strength and his silk rope, he is able to stop the wheel before it ends the life of Charles. But the Duke, taking advantage of the situation, grabs Carol and proceeds to flee in an automobile. Batman, pursuing the Mad Duke, gets in his bat plane and chases his quarry into the French countryside. There he begins to rappel from his batplane and lands on top of the speeding vehicle. He then begins a mad tussle with the evil Frenchman before beginning to strangle him, which causes the Duke to lose control of his vehicle and send it flying off the edge of a bridge. Batman, thinking quick, grabs Carl and escapes from the vehicle, which plunges to its doom, taking the Duc de Tori with it. Later, we see the Marie twins thanking the Batman for all the assistance that he's provided them. But Carl asks probably the most important question. "Who are you?" To which the Batman replies, "That, my dear, must be kept a secret. And now, au revoir." And so ends the issue Peril in Paris. And there we have it, Detective Comics number 34. I'm going to go out and say it that this was an okay issue. While there is some really, really interesting moments like the flower garden and the final chase scene, there's just a lot of flaws that are kind of hard to look past in this issue. The way that the plot moves just for the necessity of it. For instance, Batman just magically having his Batplane ready for him to pursue the Duke is frankly just a bit lazy. But also at the same time, Gardner's trying to do superhero storytelling. And I think he is limited by the amount of space he has. And who knows, just maybe not having a good editor. Hard to say. It was a different time. This is early DC Comics. Things were a little bit, a bit more fast and loose, to say the least. Other than the notable, plot issues, it's fun. It's Batman in a different scenario, dealing with some pretty pulpy strangeness. The villain just isn't really that interesting. What's going on around the villain is more interesting than the villain himself, unfortunately. But, other than that, the coloring's pretty solid. The art's solid. Can't complain. Little closing notes I have for this issue is we do also confirm that this takes place before issue 33, because we see that the Batplane is still in existence, which makes sense, as we do know that this took directly after 32. So I guess the Dirigible Doom will be the next major event that occurs in the Batman mythos. Assuming that the Golden Age follows some traditional narrative track. The other big thing, and kind of the final reveal of this issue, which is this is the last issue that's going to be written by Gardner Fox for a while, which, for as much grief as I gave Fox for his kind of shoot from the hip writing style, without him, we wouldn't really get modern Batman. So there's definitely that needs to be taken into consideration when looking at his work. Because if anything, a lot of Gardner Fox's stories can be looked at as proof of concept that you could do, a horror story with the Batman. You could do a sci-fi story with the Batman. You could do, as stated before, this weird, pulpy, strange detective story, I guess. I would say his run is the bedrock for the foundation on which the future Batman mythos are going to be built off of. I don't think a lot of people are going to attempt what Fox was trying to do with the Batman, at least for a while. I don't want to reveal who the next team is, but who are going to get us back on track to moving us closer and closer to that peak Golden Age Batman that most Bat historians will consider this era to be most known for. But with all that being said, what are your thoughts? Whether it be on this issue, Gardner Fox's take on the Batman, Do you think I'm being, once again, too harsh on what is supposed to just be a early Batman mythos? I would love to hear from you. But with all that being said, let's leave our bumper for next issue and get out of here. In which Batman goes to Chinatown? Thank you for listening. And 10 subscribers. Hell yeah. Thank you guys so much.